Rhode Island native coming in to talk about her new book. Hello, Sunshine. Happy to welcome back a regular guest here, Spencer Sullivan, Rhode Island native, founder and CEO, Lean Campaign Strategies, to get the inside the Beltway take on the latest in politics. Spencer, yesterday we had Roger Williams law professor Jared Goldstein sort of breaking down looking at the real legal aspects of Brett Kavanaugh's nomination by President Trump. But really, what's been the political response to this?
Yeah, I think we see both sides here. I think you see the Democrats kind of calling this outrageous, and I think unfortunately for the Democrats right now, if you call everything outrageous, then nothing's outrageous type of process. There was an email going out from a Democratic organization that said, this judge, insert XX name, actually was in the email context, was sent out, but it's terrible, this despicable, it's going to kill people and whatnot. So
with not knowing who the nominee was.
Yeah, exactly. And so they forgot to proofread it, and they sent it out the email as a fundraising letter, and they made that mistake, right?
That's not a little snafu. That's a big snafu.
A big snafu. That no matter who President Trump was going to choose, that the response was going to be the same, right? What it really comes down to here, and this bigger picture back to 2016 was, look, President Trump put out a list of judges, and obviously that was a solidifying point for a lot of Republicans who weren't super happy with the nominee and his banter back and forth on how he handled himself, but was a good enough reason for them to vote for President Trump, right? Not only was it good enough for Neil Gorsuch, but also, look, this was kind of widely known that Kennedy would probably be stepping down, resigning at some point, retiring at some point. So this is just another process. This is if they handle this process, if the Republicans and President Trump handle this process as they did with Neil Gorsuch, this is most likely going to happen. I'm a Boston Red Sox fan, so I'm very hesitant to say this is a done deal, whether we're up 10 runs or down 10 runs. I'm very confident. The question is, if all Republican senators vote yes, excluding John McCain because he's out in Arizona, that from Alaska, then you always have the lovely Senator Rand Paul who votes no or always wants to be contrarian on certain things, right? So if all Republican senators can vote yes, and then it really doesn't matter, to be honest with you.
And let's talk a little bit about Brett Kavanaugh, because one of the things that folks are looking at and talking about, obviously, is about his time in the Bush administration and just the sheer amount of information that might be poured over, but that really would depend on how much is actually going to be made public.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Obviously he has his history with W. Bush, and obviously was appointed, confirmed to the D.C. appellate with bipartisan praise, right? So I think any justice or any nominee to be a justice is going to have some weak spots or some concerns to go over with, and that's part of that paper trail they have to get through. And I think they got Neil Gorsuch done in 66 days. Obviously, their goal here is to kind of do the same thing before the midterms. Obviously, past midterms, that becomes a little bit more dangerous.
Absolutely. And let's talk about midterms, and let's talk about what the congressional leadership structure could look like depending on the outcome in November. There have been some looks at sort of either a post-Pelosi world, and clearly we know there is a post-Paul Ryan world. Let's talk about Pelosi, again, kind of keeping that stranglehold on her power there. Obviously, there was a lot of talk in New York 14 when Joe Crowley was defeated about just the future of the Democratic Party leadership. Talk with us. Let's go back to the New York 14 primary and your reaction to what transpired there.
Yeah, I think you're seeing on the Democratic side a very real debate between the future of the party, between maybe the Nancy Pelosi's of the world versus the Bernie Sanders of the world, right? And obviously that having a, I guess, self-proclaimed Democratic socialist take over the number 4th person in your House leadership, Joe Crowley, is a big statement, right? So there's been no secret that Nancy Pelosi has had to fend off some challenges in party leadership in the past years, in 2014 and 2012. Obviously, each cycle gets a little bit more aggressive in terms of her fighting off to take on her as a leader, as Speaker or Minority Leader of the Democratic Caucus. But winning, I think, forgives a lot of grievances and a lot of errors, right? So if she's able to put together a winning strategy for 2018, and the Democrats are able to take back the House in 2018, then I think Nancy Pelosi is safe for the most part.
For the most part,
if, they don't come close, kind of like they did in 2016. Then I think that challenge her leadership becomes even that much stronger, right? And then you have, to be honest with you, I don't think anyone in her leadership is under the age of 70. So that's not very representative of any type of party, let alone relatively diverse Democratic caucus in the House of Congress, right? So she's a prolific fundraiser, but it's also prolific to fundraise against her at the same time as a Republican. She's not very likable on both ends of the stream there. So if she's able to put together a winning strategy in 2018 and take back the House, I think she's safe. But again, if she doesn't come close, and it's not a very healthy year for Democrats in 2018 on the House side, then she obviously has some very real challenges, some very real concerns in terms of maintaining that leadership.
Let's talk about challenges and concerns. After seeing that defeat of Joe Crowley, GoLocal reported here looking at sort of some comparisons with Matt Brown challenging Gina Raimondo in the Democratic primary. I know you're a national guy. You're all around the country. Obviously, Rhode Island is your home state. If you're keeping a little bit of an eye on what's taking place here with the 2018 gubernatorial election, how do you see this? No, because, again, you're around the country. Again, that defeat of Crowley did send some shockwaves. Should the governor have concern here?
Yeah, I think anyone who is elected official, whether it's Republican or Democrat, both brands are kind of terrible. The Republican brand is not likable. The Democratic brand is not likable. I think we're in the phase right now for a lot of them. It's insider versus outsider. So we want to elect the outsider, get rid of the insider person who's not very connected with the electorate. I think with Governor Raimondo, I think she has a ceiling in her polls, so I think it's very tough for her to get above a certain ceiling in terms of getting approval ratings or getting people to vote for her. So really, for any opponent to Governor Raimondo, I'd say it's probably a race to the bottom in which you want to drag her down likability-wise or voting-wise, to which you're kind of tied there. But I think I saw a poll, and I think I mentioned this the other time, I saw a poll probably last month in which, gas station sushi had a more likability rating than the Republican or Democratic brand, right? So I think for any candidate getting outside of that brand, if you're able to do that, good for you. That takes some time, takes some skills to do so. But that's kind of where we stand. The Republican brand or Democratic brand is not very likable right now.
But how do incumbents, if they're sitting around that table with their advisors, work up against that wall? They can't shake the fact that they are indeed an incumbent and then they are inside the game. How do they work around that?
Yeah, I think starting early. I think you see a lot of folks now, even back in 2016, started really early campaigning-wise. Senator Rob Portman from Ohio did a fantastic job here of starting early and talking about issues that are agreeable on both sides. Right?
Okay.
One of the issues he talked about was the opioid crisis, in which it doesn't. That crisis isn't Republican or Democrat. We can all agree that it's a terrible crisis and the opioid crisis needs to be addressed. In talking about things that he was taking concrete steps to solve that, right? So you really have to talk about issues that are kind of outside the brand, but more bipartisan in the way that connects you to the electorate in which you're trying to talk to. So starting early, but also talking about issues that are common sense,
that are relatable, and
yes.
and you made the point too. Not particularly. Doesn't need to be partisan, and maybe shouldn't be.
No, absolutely. And there's a handful of issues you can discuss there. Anytime a Republican talks about taxes, or anytime a Democrat talks about whatever Trump's tweet of the day is, those are obviously partisan issues, right? And people tend to tune out. And obviously, the electorate, ever more so than I was polarized and starting to go one way or the other. But there's times in which you can step out of the brand, talk about issues you want to talk about in a common sense way, in which most people can relate to, as you mentioned, Kate. which are probably either devastating their community, impacting their day-to-day lives, or know someone that is impacting their lives as well.
So let's tack to the other side of the aisle with Paul Ryan's soon-to-occur departure. There is sort of a natural progression of who it looks like it could be to ascend the top position within the party. But there's been a lot of talk about sort of the stalemate on immigration and how the Republicans have been maneuvering under this administration. What do things look like on the Republican side?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, this is a very natural, healthy conversation to have anytime a CEO, Speaker of the House, or manager or boss kind of announces they're going to retire. There's a very natural, healthy challenge in place to see who's going to succeed them, right? I mean, that's a very natural thing. It's not so much talking about the issues of the party or leadership fault in terms of on the Democratic side. This is a very natural conversation to have. Obviously, Kevin McCarthy is the natural succession plan to Paul Ryan. However, he obviously faltered in his run for Speaker in 2016 towards later. And then obviously you have Congress, Minority Whip Steve Scalise there, who's kind of just waiting in the wind to see what's going to happen. You know, Paul Ryan has endorsed Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy has a very healthy and close relationship with President Trump. He's been photoed at many dinners and times with President Trump, not only in D.C. but also in Florida. So if Kevin McCarthy is able to put together a successful campaign for Speaker of the House, then he's going to be it. If he falters, you know, obviously Steve Scalise is there, ready to, you know, put together a campaign. Scalise has a book coming out soon. He's got kind of a campaign tour coming out as well. So it really comes down to whether or not McCarthy can solidify his campaign, get it over the cross line, and make it happen. But if not, then obviously I think the next step would be for Majority Whip Scalise to take over.
And you're inside the Beltway. You know how these things transpire with McCarthy, as you said, sort of being the portrayed perhaps heir apparent. How much is Scalise working behind the scenes to set himself up as the alternative?
Yeah, so I obviously as a former staffer, I would like to declare that I have not I haven't been in communication with him or any type of the staff there. Congressman Scalise, Majority Whip Scalise, is a very politically savvy individual, but he's also very loyal to the party, very loyal to getting the job done. And the last thing any party wants, especially the Republican Party, is to have some type of fight out there before the midterms, right? You don't want that distraction there. So I think, like as Congressman Scalise has said, Kevin McCarthy is going to be it unless something else happens, right? So he's going to support. He's not going to run against Kevin McCarthy, but he will be there if something does happen.
Well, I appreciate getting to pick your brain on where leadership potential is down in Congress as we're looking towards the elections in November. And of course, the SCOTUS nomination taking up oxygen. You know, in the coming weeks, you know, you're on the ground, you're on the trails. You know, what's really taking, as I mentioned before, up the oxygen there inside the Beltway right now?
Yeah, I think, especially in the past 24, 48 hours, it's all about NATO and what President Trump is working with NATO and that whole scene there. On the campaign side, it's just who can energize their base. This Supreme Court nomination has become a huge energizer, I think, for the Republican base, for another reason to vote for President Trump and to support his agenda. And again, on the Democratic side, I got to say, if everything's outrageous, then nothing's outrageous. And I can't repeat that enough because everyone I talk to on the trail throughout the country says the same thing. And it's, there's kind of scrambling right now from my perspective to energize their base. I mean, 6-8 months ago, they had this almost guaranteed wave year in which they're going to take back the House and maybe win the Senate. And now you're almost looking at, the Republicans are most likely going to maintain and either expand 1 or 2 seats in the Senate. Florida, maybe Missouri, North Dakota, wherever it may be. And then, maybe even hang on to the House side. So I think the Democrats are really scrambling to not only energize their base, but retain that energy and momentum through November.
Okay, $1 million question. Spencer Sullivan, Rhode Island native. When are you coming home?
I'll be home the first week of August. I was on a phone call with some family today. I swear, I was on a phone call with family, and it's going to be a short weekend trip. I don't get paid to say this, but I'm going to go to Jay's Deli and then Cumberland House of Pizza Chops. I'm not going to make my ability to get out to Block Island. That's not going to happen. Hopefully next time, but Jay's Deli and Chops are certainly two things I got to do when I come back to the state.
You'll get the best of Rhode Island when you're back. But as always, Spencer Sullivan with Lean Campaign Strategies. We appreciate being able to pick your brain as to what's taking place down inside D.C. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate.
Okay.
Really
Thanks, Spencer. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to get very local here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.